body didn't seem to work.
Zombies. Who doesn't love zombies? I mean, they're so easy to figure out, and whether they're the fast runners that we've seen a lot in recent years, or the slow, shambling hordes that have relentlessly pursued any sign of human life since John Romero defined the zombie genre, they've just been a staple of films and video games ever since. But the operative word in that is horde, and there's really nothing that I can think of that's quite like Dead Rising 3 in terms of the number of zombies that it can happily drop into the world for you to play in. But for the Xbox One release, it did actually come at a cost of needing to drop the game's resolution down to 720p and only managing to do 30 frames per second. But with the PC version of the game released last week and the CPUs and GPUs available to PC gamers that can easily outstrip the components in the latest consoles, there was maybe a hope that this would solve some of the game's issues. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite manage it. Overall, the game just feels like it hasn't been particularly well optimised for the PC, and I mean, I'm running an overclocked Intel Core i5 3570K, 16GB of RAM and an AMD Radeon R9 280X. And I know that's all complete nonsense and gibberish to a lot of you, but while it's certainly not the fastest hardware out there, it's pretty high end, and it does really well with hitting 1080p and 60 frames a second with maximum or near maximum settings in most modern games. But with Dead Rising 3, this system actually has two problems. First up, the game itself has got a 30 frames per second frame limit built in, alongside the usual option to turn on VSync. The only way that you can turn this off is by creating a special user.ini file, putting it in the same folder as your game's executable. Essentially, it's just a hack, and Capcom warned that some things might not work properly with the frame rate unlocked like this. The much bigger problem, though, is that even once you've unlocked the frame rate, the game just doesn't go far enough beyond that 30 frames per second point. I don't expect it to dip below 30 frames per second, and yet it sometimes does. I can't really sustain a frame rate beyond 40 frames per second very reliably, let alone approaching the desired 60 frames per second, which would actually make all of this fiddling with the settings worthwhile. And anecdotally, it seems that it's near impossible to push on and have a stable 60 frames per second, even with even more higher end components than what I have. There are things that you can do to get better performance though. I mean, the high detail setting is very similar or almost exactly the same to the Xbox One game. It actually, by default, the high detail setting actually runs the game internally at 720p and upscales to whatever resolution you pick. You can go into the settings and then push that up to 1080p, so it's actually running at full HD, which is what I did, but you can then step that down to 900p as like this middle ground between visual quality and performance. But while it does naturally help avoid some of those performance dips, I didn't really get a tangible lift in the frames per second. But there are lots of other options, and it's like texture detail, mirror effects and stuff like that, which you can drop to make this game playable on lesser graphics cards. So that is an option if you don't quite have a peak machine. But by and large, I'm actually more than happy to play at 1080p with 30 frames per second for this kind of game, because it's not really reflex based. And though it can occasionally drop for a second or two into the high 20s, it's pretty good at maintaining that locked frame rate for me, especially with the VSync turned on, which does help with some of the tearing. There are other issues with the game though, with people reporting a lot of crashes, which seem to depend on the video card drivers that you have, and which I've actually found to happen every single time I try to quit the game, so I'm always going and opening the task manager with Ctrl-Alt-Delete. There's also really long load times when you first load up the game world, and also when you head back to the main menu, quite bizarrely. And also, aiming with the mouse just feels off and much less precise than I'd like. I think there must be some kind of acceleration going on there. But if you can put all of that aside, live with that frame rate, plug in a controller, and best of all get a friend to play the game alongside you, it's an absolute blast. It's such a shame that these technical details are going to hold it back in a lot of people's minds, because it's just so much fun to run around Los Perdidos as Nick Ramos or as the co-op buddy, which is Dick Baker, with the drop-in co-op as well. And it's just ludicrously good fun. You can just hop into a steamroller and cross zombies really, really slowly, or you have the ability to kit bash 2 vehicles together, so you can get a motorbike and a steamroller and then create that into something altogether more gruesome and fast. Or then you've got all of the crazy weapons where you just attach a buzzsaw to a sledgehammer, or combine a dragon head with a parasol and get this ridiculous mecha dragon head and headbutt your way through all of the zombies. And there's countless other things that you can try out in the game. And those zombie hordes really are so very impressive. I mean, they literally just pack out some streets completely chock-a-block with zombies. But admittedly, they're pretty dumb. If you move quickly enough, then you can generally get by without them really noticing you that you've been there. But if you stick around for long enough, stop paying attention for even a few seconds, you can quickly find yourself surrounded and having to try and beat a hasty retreat to somewhere a bit safer. So it's a real shame that the game isn't better optimised for PC, and hopefully they will be able to do some things via patches in the near future. But honestly, if you can get past that, it's definitely worth a look, and especially if you can twist a friend's arm to get them to come and play it with you. And so with that, I'm actually going to leave you with some clips of me and Bonimo Mike playing the game. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and we will see you next time.
Oh! Oh my good God.
Hello!
Tag team, sir. Oh, steady! You take the left, I'll take the right. Coming through.
Are you going to do the ramp? Do the ramp.
Oh shit, I fell off.
It's not! Tef,
Yeah?
you rescue my lifeless body.
I will.
Oh god!
I'm alive!
You're on fire now though, you need to get off.
My God! Amazing! Get up! Get up! No, don't crash me! Oh, for